Welcome back. Talking to Doug Shaw, and we're talking about the whole issue of accountability in nonprofit organizations, especially ministries. One of the things that Doug said earlier that I really did appreciate is that there are legal guidelines, but there's also moral guidelines. And as Christians, we have to go beyond just the legal. We have to look at the moral issue, the biblical issue, and go beyond just the legal. When John Ashcroft was Attorney General, I was at a meeting at the White House with President Bush, and John was in that same meeting. And before the president came in, he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, a society or a culture that only lives according to the minimum of the law will not survive. That it only is as good as its nobility, rising above the legal into the noble, into the moral. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
It is, and I think also another good person to quote here would be Robert K. Greenleaf in his book Servant Leadership. He talked about society is also judged by how it treats the least in that society.
Exactly.
And I think what we're encountering here in this situation are some folks that perhaps have overlooked some of those axioms and have gone into situations where they are, to some degree, if not in many degrees, involved in excess.
Exploitation?
I believe so.
What we had said just before the break is how big of a cloud is this going to be, and how big of a shadow is it going to cast over ministries, even very legitimate, very accountable ministries?
Well, that's my concern. That's why the shadow or the cloud could be large. It depends on what information is forthcoming, if information is forthcoming, how far it's taken in the process, if indeed subpoenas are issued, if indeed the IRS becomes involved, if there are investigations. I think that what generally tends to happen as fundraisers, we see a lot of trends. And whenever something arises like this, people do tend to pull back. And I think one of the things that we've seen with particularly, I think, television ministries, and I'm not saying this to you personally, but what I am saying is a lot of television ministries, what they have to watch out for right now is to make sure that they are practicing full disclosure, because people are going to become even more skeptical because of what's transpired. They're going to ask.
Doug, one thing that I would have to say,
yes.
And I've been in television ministry for a long time.
Yes.
And every time that's brought up, it's always television ministries, but you also represent radio ministries. And there's a lot of radio ministries that have some of the same problems. So it's not just a television problem, and it's not just a media problem.
Yes.
There are a lot of churches that have come in under this same kind of scrutiny. And in fact, in Paula and Randy White's case, they're as much of a church as they are a television ministry.
Yes.
So.
And well put. I shouldn't single out television as.
But most do. I mean, we're the one that take the brunt of all this.
And I appreciate
maybe,
your point.
Maybe we brought it on ourselves.
I think the visibility issue is one, but I do believe you're right. I think radio. I think a lot of other ministries. People are going to ask questions about giving in general right now. How do I know my money's really going where I intend it to go? And they are owed an answer to that question.
But the idea here is ask the questions. Don't stop giving.
Yes.
Find ministries that you can give to, that you can believe in, that are accountable and can show you their accountability.
Yes.
Ask the questions you need to ask, but for goodness sakes, don't stop giving.
Absolutely.
Giving is that's part of the responsibility and opportunity of being a part of the kingdom.
And that's why I'm here today. I really want to underscore the fact that there are far more legitimate, hardworking, God-honoring ministries than there are those who are skirting some of the issues. And don't withhold but ask the questions. I think that's really key. Good.
Okay, we have a break. Am I going to a break? Is that what it is? I'm going to a break, then we're coming back. Yeah. Sorry, I have to do a little bit of homework here. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm talking with Doug Shaw, and we've been talking about accountability within ministries and what the ministry should do to be accountable, and what you should do as a potential donor to be accountable with the gifts that you're giving. One last question before we go to Huntley Brown again, Doug. If wrongdoing is discovered, what could be a worst case scenario? You mentioned subpoenas earlier.
Yes.
The Senate committee, I don't think, can subpoena. So sooner or later it would have to be turned to the IRS.
Yes.
People subpoenaed. What could be the worst case scenario for these ministries?
I think it really depends on what they determine. If indeed it does go to that process of subpoena and full investigation, and if there is criminal activity determined, then of course, as we saw in the PTL case many years ago, and I don't try to draw too close of a parallel, but I have to say it is looming in people's minds.
Yeah.
And if there is criminal activity that is determined, then the possibility of jail time is there for some. Could be there for someone.
Which it brings up an interesting delineation here with Jimmy Swaggart. Had nothing to do at all with finances. It was a matter of financial malfeasance. It was a matter of moral malfeasance.
Yes.
And so it wasn't any kind of criminal activity. He just had a pretty severe moral problem. In the case of Jim Baker, there was a much bigger issue that was being dealt with that had to do with the possibility, the potential of financial malfeasance. So that was a bigger issue. What we're talking about here is the possibility of financial malfeasance.
Yes.
Which could be a very serious issue, which could be deemed as criminal.
Could.
Now, one thing I want to make clear here is that because there's been an inquiry of these 6 ministries, does not mean in any way, shape, or form that there are financial problems with these ministries. They are completely innocent until proven guilty. These ministries were chosen for whatever reason. All of them were very visible ministries, and all of them, have a fairly high profile, but it doesn't mean that they're guilty.
No, and I echo that. I think innocent until proven guilty. I think that hopefully it doesn't get to the point where that is even necessary, that full disclosure will be forthcoming, and that people can become more self-monitoring and yield to outside authority.